All right, here's the passenger side, and you can see the rotors got the I don't know if you can see that in the video, but you can see all the lines from the heat scorching. So that's why I'm replacing the rotors, because like I said, they got a lot of that. They squeal pretty bad, front and rear, due to the heat soaking from doing some hard towing, hard braking, while towing down some pretty nasty hills and stuff. And so like I said, that's why I just took the wheel off, and I'll give you guys a view once I get that off. Oh, and for compressing the caliper, what I use is I got these big C-clamps, and I just slide the C-clamp in there, slide it to the back side there, and then I do another one below it, like that, and I just wiggle the, I just slowly turn the piston in, you know, turn the C-clamps and compress the piston in very slowly and evenly, so nothing gets distorted or damaged. Now what I did is I just took a little bit of sandpaper and just cleaned the surface of the pistons a little bit and the inside of the caliper a little bit, just to get some of the rust and stuff off. So I just cleaned that up, and then I washed it down with some brake cleaner. Alright, now the caliper bracket bolts are held in with a Loctite from the factory. So what I'm using to break them loose, because even the impact, a 1/2-inch impact's not breaking those loose. So what I did on the other side, and I'm doing on this side, is I'm using that's a 21mm socket on a breaker bar, and then on the breaker bar I give it a piece of pipe, about a 3-foot, about a 3-foot section of pipe on the end of the breaker bar, just to give it a little bit of persuasion to break that Loctite loose. And once I break it loose, well, actually, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the wheel and unlock the wheel, turn the wheel so this part is facing outward, so I have access to it, and then I'll get the breaker bar with the pipe on it and give it a little bit of a snap just to break that loose, and then I'll run them out with the impact. Alright, you can see I got the wheel turned outward, and oddly enough, I was able to break it loose with just a breaker bar. So I just broke it loose. Now I'm going to run them the rest of the way out with the 1/2-inch impact. Alright, these were the bolts with a 21mm head that were in here that go into the caliper bracket. And what I did is I just took the sandpaper, cleaned up the surface where the caliper bracket mounts, top and bottom, cleaned it off with some brake clean. And there's the caliper bracket. Now I'm going to remove these clips, replace the clips with the new ones, clean it all up, and then put the anti-seize, the copper anti-seize on here before I put the clips on. And I'm going to remove the pins, the slide pins, and put the new boots on, and put the ceramic silicone lubricant on there, and put that all back together, and then put that start. Oh, and then to get the rotor off, that's going to take a little bit of a whack with a mallet. So I'm just using a soft face mallet. And of course, it doesn't want to come, so I'm going to have to give it a little extra persuasion. I'm probably going to end up tossing these in the garbage anyway, in the recycle, so I'm just going to give it a whack with a regular hammer and let it be what it is. Oh, and before I get all crazy with hitting the rotor here, what I'm going to do first is actually just give it a few taps in this area here, like right here. And and on the face just to try to break it loose. All right, after many multiple attempts of tapping around here and everything, what I ended up doing was using my square pipe, and I just went in between here and there and just gave it a little bit of a tug, and it came loose. So you might need to give it a little persuasion. This one was really on there pretty tight. All right, and this is where I used my little wire brush, and there's grease on here. They had a grease backing on here between the hub and the rotor, so I already used a rag with the brake cleaner and just cleaned off most of the grease. Now I'm just brushing away some of the rust and whatever debris is on there, and then I'll wash it down with brake cleaner, and then I'll put a new coating of the copper anti-seize on there on the back of the new rotor before it goes on here to prevent it from seizing up on there. All right, you can see I got that nice and clean. Cleaned everything out with the rag, brake cleaner, and a wire brush. Got it back down to the factory finish. So there's no debris on there, and that means the rotor is going to sit on there perfect. And with the copper anti-seize, it'll have a little bit of a cushion to reduce vibration and squeal. All right, I just removed the old clips off the caliper bracket with a screwdriver. I just pried them off, and I'm going to use the wire brush and some brake cleaner, clean in between all the where the caliper slide bushings go, clean that up, and then I'll put some copper anti-seize on those locations. All right, I cleaned up the caliper slide areas on the caliper bracket with the wire brush. Clean that up, wash it down with brake clean, use the sandpaper, clean the mating surfaces between there and the knuckle. And I removed the pins, cleaned the pins good with the cloth with brake cleaner on it. Got all the old stuff off, so they're nice and clean. And now I will put the new boots on and re-lube the pins with the silicone, and put it all back together. All right, I put the ceramic silicone grease on the pins. This side is in already. You see it's moves nice and easy. And this one's going in. And what I do is I just rotate it on the way in just to make sure it's all spread in there good. And then when I get down the end, just give it a little squeeze, and it pops on. And that's it. I just wipe off the excess a little bit. And that's good. That one's good. Like I said, they should be totally free floating. No, I mean, a little bit of resistance because the compound, well, it's also cold out. It's about 40 degrees out right now, so the compound is, the silicone's a little thick, but it should go nice and easy with a little bit of resistance. And then like I said, I'm going to put the copper anti-seize on these surfaces, and then put those stainless steel clips on. All right, you can see I got a good coating of the copper anti-seize on there on everything, and like I said, now I'll put the stainless steel brackets on. All right, all the stainless steel clips are in. You can see that, like I said, the long end sticks out right there. So that's how it should look. And I'm just going to mount the caliper bracket onto the knuckle. Alright, here's the new Powerstop rotor. I would just want to point out that these are directional, and they are labeled for each wheel that they go on. And if you notice, the rotation is this way, so as it wipes, it pushes the gases outward as it goes around. So it wipes the pads, and it makes the gases from the pads go through the holes and out this way. It kind of creates like a vortex effect, And so just make sure you, if you do this, pay attention to which side they go on, and that they go in this rotation with all the angles going backwards, and kind of like it goes outward as it goes around. And then I'll flip this over, and what I'm going to do is use the Permatex copper anti-seize, and I'm going to put a coating, a real thin film on the inside of this where it mates up on the hub, so it doesn't seize on there, and allows a little bit of movement so it doesn't vibrate. Oh, and the other thing that I do is I use the brake cleaner on a rag, and I just wipe the surfaces with the brake cleaner just to make sure that there's no oil residue on the rotor surfaces. You don't have to do anything else, just do the the main contact surfaces with the pads. All right, so now I'm just going to do a light coating of the Permatex anti-seize. Just do a little dabs in here. Just spread it around. And this will, like I said, keeps the rotor floating, because the copper compresses, and it'll tighten up the tolerances on the rotor against the hub, and create kind of like a barrier to keep your rotor from vibrating and squealing. All right, and once you get the rotor sitting on there, you just put 2 lug nuts opposite each other. Put those, just snug those down lightly, and that'll hold your rotor in place while you get your caliper bracket and pads and everything, and caliper and all in place. And then after that's all in place, right before you have to put the wheel on, you just take your lug nuts off. And then, like I said, I put the anti-seize, the silver anti-seize on the lugs to prevent them from seizing up, and just make them come off easier, like I said, when you gotta do it by hand. All right, the caliper bracket is in place. I tighten down the 2 bolts, and I'm going to put the caliper on. Actually, first I'm going to put the copper anti-seize on here, on the pistons, and on this surface in here where it touches the pads, and then I'll put the caliper on after I put the pads in place. All right, pads are in, and caliper is next. Oh, and I did forget to mention, just lightly sand the surfaces of your caliper and pistons, just so it's a clean surface with no rust and imperfections on it. All right, and there's my coating of copper anti-seize on that surface, and on the pistons. And now I'll just take it off the hook and install it on the caliper bracket. Now, and it is easy to do your top one. Just put the screw in lightly and then pivot it down in place and then push that in, versus trying to put the whole thing in and then doing both at the same time, because it's a little bit usually it'll get hung up on one or the other. So I found that it's easier just to do your top one and then pivot it down and then push this one in. All right, and there it is. I turned it back straight. Everything's mounted, snugged up, and I'm just going to take off the 2 lug nuts, put the regular anti-seize on the lugs, put the wheel back on, torque it, and the front's done. And then tomorrow will be the back. This little piece of advice, shops usually hate it, but I usually put a little bit of anti-seize on the surfaces where the wheel mounts to the rotor, just to create that little bit of a barrier, so when you do need to get the tire off in a bad situation out on the road, the tire will come off easily, the wheel will release and doesn't get stuck onto the rotor. So like I said, I'll usually just put a little barrier on here and just a little clean this up with your wire brush, and put a little bit of anti-seize right here, and hope that helps. And that's how I put it on. Like I said, I cleaned it with the little wire brush by hand, a little bit of wiped the rag with brake cleaner on it, and then just put a little coating of anti-seize on there, and that'll make your wheel come off easy every time. Like I said, shops hate it. If you have to go get your tires mounted and balanced, then they get their anti-seize on their spacer cones, but you know, it's kind of a trade-off.